Bismillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Thank you everyone for being here for Amaroha event and exhibition. And now we're going to start our first session of the discussion. And it will be the first gathering of Nuqtat Amara, where myself, Amr Mahdi and Abdurrahman Abdullah will be your host for this afternoon. So Nuqtat Amara, or Architecture Point, is an architectural dialogue between professionals and educators to exchange knowledge, thought, and expertise about issues related to architectural design, education, and research in the Arab region. Nuqtat Amara was an idea that I had in my mind since I came back from Canada 2 years ago, and after sharing the idea with my friends Abdurrahman Abdullah, Dr. Mohammed Bafsail, Riyad Ashmil, Amr al-Kharroubi, we established a group to be the platform, an open platform for architectural criticism. Also, we would like to take this opportunity to thank all students, faculty, administration, staff who made this event possible through organizing and spreading the word. Now I will leave you with Mr. Abdurrahman Abdullah to introduce the topic of today and the speakers of the first session.
Thank you, Umar. So we titled the event today, Design Process In, Out, Out, In, trying to express it as a network with influences that comes from the outside to the inside. Architecture is an ever-evolving field of practice, or is it? At times of streaming information, changing spatial requirements, rising market and social demands, the built environment remains evidently the sphere and architecture as a device, quoting KM3 MVRDB. Here, architecture is seemingly seen as a smartphone, a device that both hesitantly and forcefully continues to respond to information, time, and technology. But has architecture ever evolved? Through that lens and contextually looking at Saudi Arabia, design process in, out, out, in, it inspects the role and tools the architect has in making space and the influxes that intertwines with and through it, by looking at the architectural case as the envelope and exerting its body on the macro and micro levels with design and decision-making issues in Saudi Arabia. So I'll start by introducing the speakers. And at first I'll start with Tariq Fadeg. Tariq is a close friend of mine. I have known Tariq since we were 6 years old. He was a close friend, and although we have not planned for it, we met at the University of Dammam Architectural School. And since then he was my colleague, my studio colleague. For someone who was always concerned with details in his school projects, it is not surprising to see how Tariq inherited over the years immense knowledge in material specification, construction technology, and building safety and occupancy standards and codes. He joined Jacobs Zait in 2012, and now he's a senior project architect. Before that, he worked for SLFE for 6 years as an architect as well. Among other responsibilities he took is a design specialist, site supervisor, and project coordinator. He's a member of the AIA, a member of International Code Council, and a registered professional architect at the Saudi Council of Engineers. Second speaker is Amr Ghazawi. Amr Ghazawi, a part of my curiosity always and follow-up and interest in his fashion style and eradication of the thobe. Amr Ghazawi is a talented designer. I still remember one of his models that he made for the campus mosque in King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, While he approaches architecture and urbanism with pragmatism, he finds his ways to present the projects he works on poetically. He founded a Zawiya in 2012, where he still practices architecture on multiple project scales. Amr received his bachelor's degree from Pratt University in New York. He worked internationally, specifically in London, under the supervision of Patrick Schumacher, who was the director with Zaha Hadid at the time. I'll also introduce the third speaker, who's from KFUPM, Chairman, Dr. Mohammed Babsail. Of course, he's well known, and I wouldn't take long in introducing him to you, but what is surprising about his background is that he's been interested in teaching since he was a student at KFUPM. He continues to teach and do a lot of research in sustainable design. He held also teaching experiences while he was a student at Illinois. He's also, and professionally, he works at the Sustainable Design Consultant in Jeddah, Design Lab. I can't remember the name, and it's written so small here, but he's definitely involved in professionally in sustainability and green technology. So I would ask the speakers to join us on the stage. I'll also introduce the moderator for this talk, Mr. Amar Al-Mahdi. Amar Al-Mahdi, he's a graduate from Waterloo in Canada. He's also involved in a lot of teaching experiences. He worked since he graduated with his bachelor's degree in architecture from KFUPM. He joined Bechtel company in Jubail, where he practiced for about a year, and then joined KFUPM. So I would like to ask the speakers and the moderators to join us on the stage.
Okay, so we're going to start our first session, design process in out. I'm going to start by a quote by Juan and Ralph about design, a definition of a design. Design as a noun, it's a specification of an object manifested by an agent intended to accomplish goals in a particular environment using a set of primitive components satisfying a set of requirements subject to constraints. So as this a little background, we can summarize that design process fall under three phases, which is the first phase is issues or needs, and the second phase is position or context. The third phase is architectural manifestation or form. And we're going to start with Mr. Amro. Can you tell us what's your understanding of the design process?
The design process starts with psychology, I believe. You need to understand who your client is and what his needs. So it starts just basically sitting with the client and understand what he wants and try to give him the quality that he needs in terms of function, what else? Daily needs. So, and the quality of life, basically. You need to teach your client how to understand the quality of life.
What about the challenge?
In terms of the standards, I think it's a good thing. For example, We did a building in Riyadh for a commercial building, and there was the the Saudi American standards building codes, and it was pretty challenging. And we did work with a team in Bahrain, which they have a different building codes. The combination of both, having both, let's say, mentalities of doing work, it was pretty challenging to get an immaculate design at the end. And this actually what makes each building different from the other in terms if it was a commercial or a residential building. And this is where you see design process happens. And it actually evolves by time while we're working on it. And this is where it becomes a good design. So, I hope this.
Can you tell us about your understanding of the design process?
Actually,
And can we have another mic for the college?
first of all, I feel really delighted to be a part of this opportunity to share viewpoints and experience, and we all hope to get the most of this event. In my understanding, the design process, as my colleague said, starts from gathering the right information from the client. So from architectural standpoint, as a part of the design process, and our primary client is Aramco, so the design process starts from the gathering this information in the kickoff meeting. Before we kick off the project, we all, as a team, architectural, including MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, we gather together, we gather this information, we share lesson learned to write, to start the project in the right foot. So after the kickoff meeting, we start with the, depends on the scope of work. We start on the project proposal and the detailed design. So that's yeah.
Okay, can we hear from Dr. Bob Sell as a educator and professor in architecture department? So what's your understanding of the design process?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, thank you again for this opportunity and for the guest speakers here. And I would like to welcome all of you, students, faculty members, and guests. And we hope such a dialogue today that will be beneficial for both our students and us as educators or practitioners. And I'm sure that there will be too many points that to highlight. Design, in my mind, is actually a very dangerous word, because anything is design. Engineers or mechanical, structural, civil, everybody use the word design. But I think that the thing that we should focus on here is the architectural design, per se. So this should go back to the point that we have to make. What is architecture, in my mind? A bus stop, I found this is the most actually telling or the most truth about architecture. And too many people ask me what is the difference between a typical building, a building that is designed by a civil engineer or an architect. And the answer is that the definition of architecture lies in two lines. A bus stop or a bicycle shed is a building. Qasr Tuwaiq, for example, in Riyadh, is architecture. And that is the difference. People ask, why do we need architecture? Well, you need an architect because an architect is trained to go through the design process that we are talking about, to understand the context, to understand what the client needs, to understand what the project is about, to understand the issue, why we are creating this building in the first place, and who is the center point of that building. Is the occupant, you and me, right? So with that in mind, we can say that design, yes, it is a process, but in the meantime, it is a well-defined process, and it is actually a significant process that affects people's life. Actually, the sheer enjoyment, actually, being an architect or practicing architecture about architecture. Because as my colleague said, you are given a design problem or you are given a building to design. I'm sure in this room we can come up with at least, by our numbers of different design solutions. But being able to generate that into a process and have a creative outcome, that is a successful design process in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Babsel. Now we come back to Amro. As a question, so do you only respond to the client demands, or you try to practice problem solving at a larger spectrum, thus relating to issues like sustainability, social issues, and if you do, how do you do it?
This is a good question, because you need to understand, first of all, it all depends still. I go back to the client. There are clients who are just looking for something that is basic, right to the point. They do not care. They need money right now in terms of their businessmen. They want something that gives them a high return in the shortest time that can happen. When it comes to going deeper into the project, and for them to understand, what do you expect this building to give you in the next 30 or 40 years? This is where you see that the client is actually not interested. So you're always limited with the process of you becoming, let's say, going into the project into a deeper, how do you see this?
You want to drive into a larger spectrum?
A larger spectrum, but it will beneficiate the actual building.
So you have to put
So-
the money where it wants.
Exactly. So then you need to, let's say, for example, if this, let's say, it's going to be categorized into 3, A, B, and C. You need to, for example, expand in A, minimize in B, and let's say, just ignore C. For example, for you to get that building with what do you think is the best thing for this client's needs. So it all depends still. I go back always to the client. It's just because I'm in the market. And it's different. It's totally different when you're in school or in a design, let's say, in a design environment. They have a theoretical understanding of design. So because clients they do not understand anything about design, with all due respect, but you need to give them a bit of knowledge.
So you have
sometimes.
to educate them.
You have to educate them.
The
Exactly.
clients.
But sometimes you just need to stop, because this client will not understand more than this. It's not that he's ignorant. It's just that because this is what he needs. So you just need to provide him.
Mhm.
So I hope that this answers your
Yeah.
question.
Okay, so Mr. Tariq, so do you agree that you only respond to the client demands, or you look at it to focus in a larger spectrum, for example, on social issues or let's say cultural issues relating to the project?
Well, actually, we always look at different aspects. So we conduct a meeting with the client and try to get all his requirements for the project. And sometimes the client and we encounter this problem a lot when we work in any project. He doesn't have any architectural background, so whether he's mechanical or electrical or sometimes the scope of work we receive, it's not well defined. So we help the client in getting more information to the scope work, helping to help them, guiding them, and to give them more insights of the project. So, for example, we receive sometimes a very concise scope, and we're requested to create, to initiate a document called a PDR, which is a project design request. So we help the client in identifying all the requirements in terms of architectural or mechanical, and what are the studies that has to be identified in the scope in order to come up with a well efficient project. And also we identify all the major or potential flaws that we might encounter in any project. So we always try to get these studies from any previous projects, and we conduct sessions like lesson learned sessions and constructivity
So
studies.
can we say you are redefining the problem?
Yes.
Okay, before you provide the solution.
Before we provide solution, because this might have a major impact on the cost. A lot of times the client doesn't have any clear direction of what's in his mind, or he doesn't have any clear vision. So we help them to guide into one clear direction. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Bob said I'm going to repeat the same question. So as an architecture school, do we teach students just only to reply to the demand of a client, or we encourage them that you have to make a great architecture out of a project, and at the end educate the client about the benefit he might get out of this project, regardless of the cost or the money issue? So what's your point?
Well, I think that it's both, actually, both, because sometimes there is a thin line between, respecting or attending to the client's needs, and if you are running an architectural business, you need to survive at the end of the day. You need to have projects, right? There is very thin line, and I'm sure that every practitioner knows about it. But the architecture or the building design is as good as the client. Yani, if you have a good client, you're going to end up having a good architecture, most likely. But the gap, I can surely second the opinion of Mr. Tariq, is that the gap usually exists when clients do not have a clear understanding or do not even have a program, an architecture program. In fact, yesterday and the day last week, I was sitting in the what they call master thesis defense in our college here. Two master students. They are trying to define the problems between, design contractors and facility managers, for example, in one case, and where the gap lies. And they found out it's actually, from the opinion of experts, it's actually, most of the problems comes from the programming itself. You don't have a clear direction, you don't have a clear objectives. The client doesn't know what he wants to do. He wants to have a building, but doesn't know whether this building will actually contribute to his business investment, or it could be done differently. The architect's role here is actually not to educate, but to guide the client to establish a very clear architectural program based on his objectives, based on the needs, and based on the constraints that the clients put. programming itself is a crucial step towards design or towards perfection of your architecture. If you don't have it, if you miss it, and there are many consultants, their only job in the market is to do programming, right?
Okay, thank you. So we can summarize that in a design process, redefining the problem, redefining the scope of the work before you start the design process and initial, actually, is even if it's not part of the design process, but actually it's a crucial part. Maybe we have this diagram, define the problem where it shows like one dot, but I think it's more than half of the process is defining the problem itself, as our guest here emphasized that you have to educate your clients and redefine the problem and the scope of the work that is needed to be designed. So going back to Mr. Amr, do you think architects are for decorative purposes only?
No, not at all. Because I think architecture, in general design, especially with architects, I always feel that architecture is the umbrella of all designs. You can create something in small or large scale. And while you're designing, you're actually finding problems and you're trying to solve them. So I think that architects are actually problem solvers in general. I don't think they are. It's not something that it's not a crust.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's something deeper than that.
Okay. So another question following the first one. So, do you think that architects have been taken away or marginalized from the design process of a project?
I'll let Tariq answer this question.
Well, actually, first of all, I'm proud to be an architect, and per my experience, the architect he always plays he's a key player in any project. So, of course not, he's not a decorative architect, because he runs the show from day one. Starting from initiating the conceptual design from scratch. He always corresponds with the client. Speaking of me as a project architect, he always corresponds with the client. He conducts meetings with the client, and always deals directly with the client in a weekly progress meeting. And he coordinates with the other disciplines, the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing in any project. And the other disciplines, with respect to them, they cannot do or modify any single item in a project unless they inform the architect. Because actually, initially, the architect, he established the project, and he intervened in any single modification in order to come up with a high quality project outcome. So they always coordinate together, and he's, as Omar said, he's the big umbrella in any project. So he's the decision maker. That's for sure.
Okay, so Dr. Babsel, can I ask you, in spite of design, what are other responsibilities, tasks, and roles does the architect play throughout the project life cycle?
Of course, there are many roles. As you know, you can always seek projects, be a business developer by itself. This is without being an architect. Sometimes, and this very famous story of Skidmore, Owing and Merrill, the three SOM, one of the biggest architectural practices in the world. Actually, one of them is actually a business developer. I'm not sure which one of them. Regulators, code or specification writers. They can do many different tasks within the life cycle of the project, and as well and this is, I have to quote our colleagues upstairs in the construction and engineering management department. They said the best project manager usually they come from architecture background. Yes. For buildings, of course.
Okay. So going back to Mr. Amro, I'm going to quote you where you said clients actually will go where the money is. So shouldn't there is a competition between architects and economic consultants, and you know that most mega projects are actually driven by economic consultants, not architects. So shouldn't be architects who taking control of these mega projects make let's say critical decisions that affecting the built environment, but at the end the decision is based on economic foundation only?
Do you want a yes or no, or do you
No.
want a...
Give me your opinion. First of all, do you think they are taking control, the economic consultants?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yes. But they do come for when there's a problem. If there is something that happens through the project. Usually, when it's 50% built, then they come into issues. This is where the architect comes in and tries to solve the problem that they have for them to continue on. So basically, we just come in a very small margin. If you want to say that most of the, let's say this project comes as an 100%, the architect comes in 5% of that. He will be involved only in 5% of that project, just for them any, let's say any misunderstood or anything that they did not know how to solve, then this is where they come to the
But then
architect.
we will have another design process, because now we are in 50%, and then
True.
going back to architects, so it will be a custom design process for that case.
Exactly.
And does it always work, or what's happening?
Of course it does work.
Like after 50%,
It does work, because then this is where the challenge comes. And this is where architects actually market themselves to take a project like that and try to solve it as fast as possible for them to continue this project while they're moving on with the project.
that's good. So Mr. Tariq, the same question about economic consultants. For example, you know that Al Jubail Industrial City was a decision based only on economic based, not architecture or built environment based. So what do you think? Do you think that architects have losing control of the design process, and it's now in hand of economic consultants, or no, you think we still have in control of a larger scope or a larger decision making throughout a large project?
Actually, as I mentioned, the architect is always involved in all the stages of the projects. So if I can give you the whole story in our work experience, the architects always we get a document called the DBSB. Okay, it's a drawing basis scoping paper. It gives a concise requirements of the client and what will be his requirements. By getting that, we develop this DBSB, and we'll always work on the on this project life cycles as going through these stages. Like for example, the 30%, the 60%, and the 90%. So as a project architect, he's always effectively working during these stages. And there is a document called ER, it's an expenditure request. there is a margin, there is a project budget. The DBSB, when we receive the projects, it's a plus or minus 40%
Okay.
of the total budget. And during this project proposal, you can work within these margins. You can introduce any
But who specified the requirements
the architect.
from the beginning?
The architect who works on the scope of work, who
Okay.
develops the scope of work from the DBSB documents. The DBSB documents, it's a plus or minus 40%. Okay, so when you develop the scope of work, it will be fully elaborated. What are the major requirements for all disciplines, and you create your own design, the conceptual design, going through all these stages, the 30, the 60, the 90. Then there is a turning point between the project proposal and the detailed design. And this turning point, there is an ER. You submit, there is a form called 56D. You work along with the architect, work along with the estimators to get the final budget for this project. You do the MTO, which is the material takeoff, and he identify all these items that will have an impact on the budget. So in this ER, the clients, they receive the documents, okay? And after the ER, there's an ERA, which is expenditure request approval. After approving the ER document, and during the detailed design, so in the project proposal, the last submission of the project proposal, it's the IFB issued for bid. After we issue the project for bid, they already allocate the budget for this project. It will be a unit rate project or an LSTK. LSTK is a lump sum turnkey.
So, sorry, I'm interrupt you. So if the proposal exceeds the budget, how you as an office or how you will deal with this proposal?
For example, let me just finish with this point, then I'll go back to. After they approve the expenditure request, the margin goes to 10 or plus or minus 10%. So going back to your question, when we receive as a client, we did the project proposal, we receive as a client the detailed design. We start from 30%. We have only the plus or minus 10%. So we have to work with this within this margin. And if we exceed this budget, this will cause it will cause a change order. So it's not easy to convince the client to sign a change order. For example, we did a project, and during the project proposal phase, all the lights was the lighting fixture was just a normal lighting fixture. So they introduced an auto sensor fixtures. This will have a major cost impact on the project. So it caused a change order. So the client, as an LSTK, he has a lump sum budget. So it exceeded his budget. So he has to claim a budget from the client. So it's not easy always to. It depends on the technical background of the architect. It depends on on his experience and his experience in previous projects. So he always try to avoid such a potential any potential errors like that. So it always depends on the architect and how he's how is his technical background, his
So
experience.
can I
with
ask
the
a
client.
question?
Yes.
What's important to you, the aesthetic element of the project or the technical aspect of the project?
Of course, both. They all comes together in parallel, and the building has to be well designed, and also the technical aspects of the building has to be well identified in any project. But there is a guidelines, and that's a constraint we always face with our clients. For example, there are 3 types of buildings in Aramco. There is tier 1, tier 2, and let's say for an office building, it lies under tier 1. So there is a basic guidelines for tier 2 office building. So as an architect, you have to follow these guidelines in terms of exterior applications, interior applications, materials, building locations, and also environmental aspects. So those are some guidelines that you have to follow.
So maybe the last question for you all 3.
Yeah.
Gonna start with Dr. Bob Said. In your opinion, how you define a successful project, a successful architectural project?
This is the cream question, how to define a successful architecture project. Well, I think to cause a building to be architecture, you have 3 choices. Either to be an architect, or to learn how to think as an architect, or you hire an architect. في option ثاني بس خلاص. To have a successful design, I think it accumulates it should have all the elements. I mean, an architect by himself, of course, is not enough for the successful of any project. It's a teamwork. We know that now buildings are more and more complex. You cannot rely on the expertise of one person or maybe 2 or 3 disciplines. It's a whole team of architects, engineers, planners, economists, business developers. To almost, there is no even guarantee for a successful of a project, but at least to minimize that gap that this project might be a failure. I think there is no guarantee for a successful project because we have seen around us too many projects being built, and after a few years actually the whole building or the whole complex is abandoned.
So you mean it was defined as successful, then it turned down, or it was not successful from the day
No, from day one, when you design a project or when you actually develop a project, definitely as a client or as a project owner, you want to have to maximize the benefits, whether financial or social or economic or whatever. You define the goals. But this doesn't guarantee whatever team you have, this project gonna be a success. There might be different issues that arise in the future, but what I'm saying is that if you have a good consulting team composing of architects, engineers, and all these disciplines, technicians, you are minimizing the opportunity of having a failure project. Yes.
So the same question to you, Mr. Tariq, how you define a successful design project?
Defining a successful project is when you try to always meet the project intent and budget, and of course time. Also, one of the major factors we always try to stress on in our project is quality. Quality always takes place in every single stage of a project.
It's not animation, it's a real space that people are actually using.
It's a post-occupancy evaluation.
Yes.
And quality. This is actually where you make your name.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 2 minutes. If you have any final remarks, thoughts you want to share with us, floor is yours.
I think it's a valuable tip. I would like to share it with you. As an architect in the beginning of your career. It's okay in the first year or second, in the first 2 years to work as a designer, because we always have this ego, you know, I'm an architect, I don't do any drafting. I'm giving you the facts. When you graduate, inshallah, this will happen. You have to always be proactive, always take initiatives, and never say no to any task given to you. Take it as an opportunity that this will be, that getting this knowledge will be a lifelong mission for you. So always take initiatives, be energetic, and believe me, by doing that, the people will get to know you by your reputation. You will not need to market yourself. Yeah, I know that, inshallah, I see, inshallah, bright future ahead of you guys, and I wish you all the best. So.
Any final remarks, thoughts you want to share with us?
We're supposed to hear from our audience if they have some questions maybe or something to share.
And the floor is open for everyone. If you have any questions, thoughts, idea you want to share with
Comments.
us.
Or maybe the final discussion.
Yeah, of course we have a final, but now we have like 1 minute if you want to share.
Thank you very much, Omar, for inviting us, and Rahman, and thanks for our distinguished panel here. I'd like to ask a question, and before I do, I want to make a comment to capitalize on what Dr. Muhammad has said nicely, that good architecture is as good as the client. Okay, we have done a project for EDA, which is Area Development Authority, to collect information about the projects that won awards, architectural projects, design projects that EDA has done in Riyadh and Riyadh in general. And we found out that there were like 20 winning projects. Some of the architectural offices that won these projects never won any projects before they worked with ADA. And ADA was very proud that these offices that worked with them has won these awards because they had a very clear scope, they had a very clear program, and a clear vision. And the task of the architect was easier actually, and it made them won these awards. So that's something that I would like to second Dr. Afzail's comment that good architecture is as good as the client himself. If the client knows what he wants, then it's easier for the client. Now, from our distinguished practitioners, we have this diagram here about the design process that we teach to our students. Define the problem, collect the information, blah, 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 make a bubble diagram, develop the bubble diagram, make a matrix for relationship, study the sun diagram, north arrow, wind direction, all these things that I'm sure you have covered in school. Do you still do this in the practice?
I use it sometimes. I do use it. We do use it.
You do
It actually helps you a lot to do. It minimizes the problems. It's a one way of you just feeling that let's go back to square one. Take this as design 101.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and see what can you do to make this design as good as it can with the cost. I always go back to the cost because the client always have a limit, and this is where we limit ourselves. So this is where the challenge is. What can you do with this amount? With this time, what can you give? What can you deliver? So, no, it helps a lot.
Aramco projects, when they work.
Aramco projects. Let me give you the facts.
Yeah, please.
We mostly work in construction documents, and there are two types of projects. There are the construction documents, which is completely black and white. You don't see any of these beautiful 3Ds. I saw that it's showcased outside, and it depends on the projects. Some projects we work on involves mainly design. So if it's a purely design project, we usually conduct charrette. We gather all the team members and we try to get, we try to brainstorm and gather all the informations, and we do these studies if it was a purely designed project that should show the conceptual design and the aesthetic look of the design. But for the mainly our projects, we do detailed design projects. So we don't do these studies. We mainly work on documents, construction specifications, and trying to find out and trying to meet the client expectations by working and emphasizing the projects as a detailed design, not as a conceptual design.
So, but do you think the reason why it is more into detailed and construction documents, it's because the key people in Aramco are mostly engineers? So basically that's why all of the projects are mostly prototypes?
It has actually, working with a client, with an architect, has an upside and downside. As an architect, architect with architect, they always clash together because they have their own preferences. So I always clash with Abdulrahman Abdullah because we always have different opinions towards the different approaches towards the project, and yeah, if the client doesn't have any architectural background, it's also good because he gives you a room of flexibility in trying to guide him and trying to bring him new thoughts, new ideas in the design to elevate the quality of the project. So.
Thank you very much. I think now we end the session 1, and we will introduce you shortly for the session 2. Abdurrahman will introduce the speakers for the session 2. Thank you very much.